everyone. Good afternoon. I'll start the event. So, I just wanted to give a very brief intro about the society. So, our society is affiliated to St. Xavier's College and it was started in 2017 by some undergrads who wanted to just share their love for physics. And we are trying to do so just to tell people how fun physics can be, how people can find it interesting and just enjoy it in a way that's not all academic and, you know, just just for the love of physics. So, and I think I was actually not prepared for this, but I'm just saying what I can. So basically, we organize a lot of events, a lot of talks. We have a magazine, we have blogs coming out, newsletters, and all that. And we just try to make, like, in a way, physics glamorous. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is what the quote we did. Like, we had this thing in the beginning that we want to make physics glamorous. So this is what we're going with. And now, not to take a lot of your time, I just want to call out Asha Shaji, our vice chairperson of Sigma Phi, to introduce our speaker today.
Thank you so much. I have the pleasure of welcoming, good evening, everybody. I have the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Arvind Paranjpe, the director of Nehru Planetarium of Nehru Science Center, Mumbai, to Sigma Phi, the Society of Physics of St. Xavier's College on the occasion of International Science Day. Before I introduce the speaker, I must say that he is a very versatile person, and you will know why in a minute when I give his introduction. So his professional career started as an assistant in the photographic laboratory of the Indian Institute of Astrophysics, Bangalore, in December 1981. From September 1984 to August 1986, he spent his time in the Himalayan regions, taking observations for a high altitude infrared observatory. After this 2 years period, he was involved in the search for minor bodies in the solar system and was part of the team that discovered a new asteroid named 4130 Ramanujan, for which the group was also awarded the Astronomical Society of India Medal. He also has an asteroid named after him. This asteroid discovered on 23rd January 1990, and its name is 17446 Mopaku, and the Pa in the name stands for Paranjpe. So he has also worked with Ayuka for around 20 years, and in the meanwhile, he completed his MSc in physics from the University of Pune. He is also a writer who contributes to newspapers and periodicals, and some of the older generations in the audience might remember him for hosting live sky shows on All India Radio, Pune and Mumbai. It's our greatest pleasure to welcoming the most eminent speaker for today, Mr. Arvind Paranjpe. So please, we are very, very enthusiastic and waiting to hear from you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm so happy to be with you. I have known this college for a very, very long time because it hosted at some point in time the Association of Amateur Astronomer and Dr. Jyoti Singh, with whom had long interaction about doing practical astronomy and so on. What I will be doing, friends, is that as the title that was given to me, that Astronomy Beyond Books, is that I'll talk to you about observational part of astronomy, how we take a look at the sky and what the fun of observing the sky, and then what science we can do. Now, in this case, I have selected a couple of topics where, as an amateur astronomer or otherwise, you can actually make some kind of a contribution. So I was asked by Apurva also that I should say something about how I joined and what I did. So let me tell you this, that I started my astronomy when I was in Bangalore. And I was that time, and I was in the final year of BSc. And Bangalore had this Indian Institute of Astrophysics. And Indian Institute of Astrophysics, sort of catalyst for starting an association called ABAA. ABBA was a group at that time, it was very famous, but the group was called Association of Bangalore Amateur Astronomers. So I was part of that, and was very happy to spend some time doing the total solar eclipse of 16 February 1980. So that is how my college time was. And we, as a college students, we did some observational program. Excuse me. The program was actually, we took the pictures of solar corona in polarized light. And the first director of Nehru Planetarium, Dr. Arvind Bhatnagar, was very gracious to have, he sent us the Polaroid sheets just free of cost. That time he was the director of Udaipur Solar Observatory. So that was a starting point. We did 3 or 4 experiments, and Astronomical Society of India allowed us or gave us a chance to present a paper. And that's how my sort of closeness to professional astronomy started. And then after my BSc, for various reasons, I had to take a job at Indian Institute of Astrophysics, where I worked in the photographic lab. Photography was my hobby, and then it became my profession. And being at the Indian Institute of Astrophysics, and since I was an amateur astronomer, I had a lot of opportunities to go to Kavlur Observatory, where at that time the largest telescope, a beautiful telescope, state-of-art telescope, that with a 40-inch mirror, or 1 meter diameter mirror. So I used to go to that observatory, do some spectroscopy, spectroscopic observations, photometric observations, and so on. Then, as I was introduced, that for a while I was alone staying, and quite a free bird. So I used to have my cloth bag kept in Kavlur. So at the drop of the hat, I would just jump into a vehicle and go to Kavlur if I wanted to. And from anywhere, so I don't have to go to my small room, which I had rented. So at that time, there was opportunity to go to Leh. So I went to Leh, spent 2 years, and it was a fantastic sky there. That's where we actually had a very nice observation of star, occultation of a star, which I will talk to you about. Search for minor bodies in the solar system, what we call asteroid. And eventually, when IUCAA started, I shifted to IUCAA. Because all through the day, all these years, I was doing amateur astronomy. I was involved in amateur astronomy. I was doing telescope making, about which again I'll talk a bit. And at IUCAA, I was looking after the public outreach program. And just exactly about 10 years ago, 10.5 years ago, there was an opportunity for me to come to Mumbai. So I joined Nehru Planetarium on 22nd of December 2010. So it's about 10 years now that I am been here. So that is my journey here, and coming to the planetarium, and before that at IUCAA, I was doing a lot of amateur astronomy, observational astronomy, and that is what I'm going to talk to you about. So as the title is that astronomy beyond books, so we remove that, and the book astronomy, what we normally call, very fondly we used to call when you're in Bangalore, is that armchair astronomy, that you don't do anything, just sitting on a chair and then keep reading about it. Well, there is a theoretical part of it which you do with your hands, but then we said that, okay, these are people who are sitting and talking, and frankly speaking, we will call it yapping about it, as you know what it means. So we did that. So let me begin with what you people can start off with. So I'm in next 15-20 minutes, what I'll be doing is that what are the steps if you want to be enthusiastic about, or you are enthusiastic about the sky or astronomy, so what you should do, and various projects which are very simple ones you can take to train yourself to become an observational astronomer. Now here also I must also tell you one very important fact, that observational astronomy now has spread from visible, that is the visible light that we see, from the radio on one side and high energy on the other side. So it's a wide spectrum. But whichever direction you go, whichever part you take, whether you become a radio astronomer or astrophysicist or whatever, okay, uh, your association with the sky does help you in many ways. So if you want to know the sky, you should have a clear idea of this sky, and then what you can do is you can use star maps like that and get yourself familiarized with the sky. For example, in this sky map, which is actually drawn for Mumbai sky at about 9:30 tonight. So this is how the sky would look about 9:30 tonight. And if you have not used the sky map, then I must also point out to you that what normally our maps, geographical map, what you have in north, south, and east and west. But when you are looking at the sky, then you are holding the map against the sky. So here, the two directions would get flipped. Either north, south will go up and north down, or east and west will get flipped because you are looking in that direction. So our first step would be actually to look for the constellations, the bright constellations, identify a few stars, and get used to them. Like tonight, if you go out around 9 o'clock or so, you will find this Orion constellation reasonably coming up, even in Mumbai sky. Okay, and then above it, there is this red color star, which is Aldebaran or Rohini, and so on. So in this sky, you should be able to identify stars of this group. Okay, but then next step would be that we start measuring the sky. And when I'm saying that measuring the sky, it doesn't mean that you need an instrument. Like for example, take this group of stars. Okay, this is Cassiopeia in the northern direction, and this is M-like constellation. So I have done this myself. Believe me, I have done this myself, and trying to estimate which star is brighter than which star. Now here, because the star map is plotted using computer and with some kind of a parameters, so you find these two stars are nearly same brightness, but one is slightly orangish, one is slightly yellowish. And when you see the colors of stars, then it tells you about the temperature of that star. So redder the star is, cooler it is, whiter the star is, hotter it is. So these are the stars with their colors. Most often in the night, some people may not be able to make out the colors, but if the sky is clear, you can certainly make out the color. But what our next task would be is to put them according to their brightness class. So what we generally give training to the students and amateur astronomer is that you look at this sky, not this particular map, but identify this constellation in the sky and put them according to their brightness class. And what you find is that the stars, like for example, this particular star, the reddish color one, is slightly brighter than this one. You see, when the magnitude increases, that means the star is becoming faint. I will not go into the reason for that, but that is how it is. That larger the number is, fainter the star is. So this star is slightly brighter, and you see it's a marginally bright. But with the practice, if you do this regularly with the practice, you can actually make out which star is brighter and which star is fainter. And this experience of yours will be very useful when you become a professional astronomer, or this habit of doing observational astronomy does help you in other fields also. Here I must also point out to you that astronomy is one subject where you really can't do any experiment. Whatever nature gives you, you have to observe it. Now take total solar eclipse. You can't reverse the solar eclipse. I can never get back that 1980, 16 February 1980 total solar eclipse. So every time you take an observation, you are racing with time. Well, so this is the kind of exercise you can do and try to arrange it. And once you get, once you practice this and get some kind of a handle onto it, then you can graduate to some other kind of observational activity. Now here I must tell you one very interesting story. Here is this Cassiopeia, which I have drawn, which I had shown you just now, those M-shaped 5 stars. There is the Cepheus constellation. There is the Delta Cepheus somewhere here. Okay, but this constellation, this Perseus constellation, okay, this Perseus constellation has a star called Algol. Algol, actually, people say the name came from Arabic word. Al-Gaul means a demon star. So this is a demon star here, which I have, which is marked in a circle. And this is the identification map of that particular region. Now, what is the beauty of this star is that, okay, and it is also called Beta Persei. Beta astronomers also catalog their stars depending upon their brightnesses. So there is one way of doing it is that brightest star is called alpha, then second brightest is beta, gamma, delta, etc. So Beta Persei is the second brightest star in this constellation. And what was noticed was that this star, with a periodicity of 2 days, 20 hours, 48 minutes, and 57 seconds, it actually becomes bright and faint. What happens is as follows, that nearly for 2 days and 20 hours or so, the star remains at the same brightness. Then over next 1 hour, next 5 hours, the star's brightness starts dropping. And then after it has reached, it has become half as bright, then it starts becoming brighter again. Now, the reason for that is that this is a binary star. You see, this is, there are two stars which are orbiting around each other. So when the brighter component, that is here, when the brighter component is blocked by the fainter component is fainter component is a larger one. Okay, there is a physics for it. I will not go into that. But remember that fainter component is fainter component is larger in size, and so it blocks the light. So you have a light dropping down drastically. And when in this second case, the other case, that is when the brighter star blocks the fainter one, you have a small drop. Now, this particular star was actually has a very nice history, and the history is that there was a chap called John Goodricke who saw it for the first time. Actually, he observed it very methodically, and he presented the data. And when he did that, he was less than 19 years of age, and this boy was both dumb and deaf. Amazing character he was. You should read about John Goodricke at some point in time, or I can share my article with you, that how he actually discovered this. And poor fellow, observing in the winter nights of England, actually he got pneumonia, and he died at a very young age of 21. In fact, for his discovery, he was actually invited to become member of Royal Society, but he could never step into the club because he was sick and he died. Anyway, but the other star which I would like to talk to you about is this particular star. It is called the Delta Cepheid, which I marked for you. Now, there is again a lot of history about this Cepheid variable. See, what you see here in the previous case, if you saw that the star brightness drops for 5 hours, it comes back, remains steady. And this particular drop, so that is this middle drop, or what we call the secondary minima. This one is called primary minima. This is secondary minima. So secondary minima is not seen visually because it's too small. But this is what we call the light curve. So star becomes faint, becomes bright, remains steady for 2 days and 20 hours or so, drops and so on. But in Cepheid variable, what you see is that star shoots up, it becomes bright, then fades. Then again it becomes bright and then fades. Now this star was actually observed by one Henrietta Swan Leavitt in 1909. And what she found was that in the Large Magellanic Cloud, there is a galaxy called Large Magellanic Cloud, which is in the southern hemisphere. And what she found was that brighter the star is, its periodicity is longer. Fainter the star is, its periodicity is smaller. And what you see here in these two graphs is that upper one is when the star becomes bright, lower one is when the star becomes faint. And there is a perfect relationship, straight relationship. And this star is used as a distant indicator. So if you can find out that what is the periodicity of this particular Cepheid variable, then you can tell how far that particular star is from you. And this is a wonderful, very important result in astronomy, because now you could actually estimate the distances to the stars. Now, this again is a star which can be actually observed with the naked eye or with a small telescope. So this is the story of Delta Cepheid. Then comes the imaging part of it. In my days, the imaging, taking picture was only on the photographic plate. We had photographic films and we had photographic plates. Your parents would know about it. There is a film kind of a thing which you load into your camera, then click a picture, then give the film to a processing shop, and then they will process it, make prints, and the picture comes into your hands. In our case, we used to have a photographic plate, and we used to develop all these things. So when we used to take a picture or a photograph of spectrum or image of the sky, it would take at least 10 minutes before the image can be seen in our hands. But the electronics has changed everything. You click, and the very next second, less than a second's time image, you can start seeing the image. So this is the imaging, and which you can do with a small camera if you have a simple SLR camera. And now even myself, I have this, if you can see this mobile camera, so I can use even mobile camera to take some pictures. So what you could actually do is that you can mount your mobile camera on a tripod or a stand and look at this algol and keep taking pictures for some hours, and then you can have a complete light curve which is plotted. Okay. Then the very important astronomical observations which you can do yourself, and which I had done. Believe me, I have done it with a small binocular kind of a telescope. In fact, just give me, it was not planned, but since I'm here, or maybe after the slideshow, I will show you. What I had done was that I had a pair of binoculars which were broken for some reason. And so I had removed the lens out of it, put it in a plastic tubing, and made a telescope and trying to observe this event. This event is that this is the moon and there is a star, and as moon travels across the sky, it blocks the star behind it. Now, there was a gentleman, he was a major in army. His name was McMahon. Okay, Mohan. And what he said was that if we can actually measure the time over which the star disappears, then we can find the angular size of this particular star. And if you know the distance and angular size, then you can get the size of star. This is a fantastic observational program by which you can get the angular diameters of the stars, and with the distance you have physical dimension. Otherwise, how do you get the sizes of stars? So he suggested that. And he estimated that the star with angular size of 0.01 second of arc should disappear in 2 seconds of time. Okay, that is what his estimation was. Unfortunately, his suggestion, though not 100% correct, but its suggestion was shot down by none other than Arthur Eddington. And we also remember Arthur Eddington was a fantastic astronomer. He talked about how the energy is produced in the sun and so on. But on a couple of occasions, he had made a blunder. For another blunder that he had made was with S. Chandrasekhar, where he pulled his S. Chandrasekhar down in public, and Chandrasekhar actually left England. That's a different story. Ma'am can tell you about it. It's a very famous story. You should read about it. But anyway, what Eddington said was, and he said it correctly, he said that when the moon blocks the star, it is like a straight edge cutting a small aperture, that is Fraunhofer diffraction pattern. So you will get a Fraunhofer diffraction pattern, and it will be so merged that you will not be able to actually measure the dimension. So he said derive that diffraction effect of lunar limb from point source would limit the time of disappearing to 8 times. Okay, it's so small. Once he said no, then this matter was completely closed. No one really bothered. Okay, no one really touched this matter. But later on, some young engineers, there was one Evans. So he, once Eddington said that it cannot be done, and no one even touched it. But then after about 30 years or 40 years or so, some young engineers, they say that, look, we can actually make use of this, that if this is the diffraction pattern, then we can use electronic devices to find out how the pattern is. And since diffraction pattern is dependent on the wavelength of light, and you know exactly how it goes, so you can, using this diffraction pattern, you can find out the angular sizes of it. It is a fantastic thinking on their part. And here what you are seeing is, this is the edge of lunar shadow. And then when you have this diffraction pattern with the central bright, then fainter, darker region, then brighter and darker, and so on, and it decreasing. So this is where, when the starlight is blocked by the lunar edge, then only the central brightness remains, and you have this particular pattern, diffraction pattern, and then telescope is placed here. So if you can take this diffraction pattern, you can find out the angular size of the star. Okay. Now, again, this experiment can be done with a very handheld instrument. I should have been prepared for it, but I can give you the link to all of you. And you can make a very simple detector. I have made it myself sitting at home using a webcam and a binocular optics, where I could actually record the occultation. So this is one certain possibility which you can play with. Okay. Now the third one is, in the same case of occultation, the diffraction pattern is that it is telling you about the star itself, which we need to know the angular size. Now comes another issue, another observational program, in which that there are large number of asteroids. Now asteroid number have gone to quite a lot, some 100,000 or so and so. Now how do you get their sizes? So one possible thing is that these asteroids are actually orbiting the sun. So once in a while, one asteroid comes between Earth and a distant star. Very recently, one asteroid occultation was predicted of a bright star, but that event did not take place. But the idea is as follows, that this particular asteroid would be casting a shadow exactly like this. There is a star which is behind, star is sending you light. So the star would be blocked by this asteroid. Suppose you are on a different latitude region, then this asteroid would be blocking. Suppose you are observing from here, then you will be this starlight would be blocked only this much length. If you are observing from here, it will be blocked for this much range, and I'll show you in the next slide. So this is what the observations were done by a set of amateur astronomers. You can see their names. So this is the occultation of a particular asteroid. Particular star by an asteroid called 10200. I think it is 135 asteroid, Heritha or something. Okay, so these are the observers which are scattered on different latitude, and you can see that this observer saw the star disappearing only for this much of time. This one saw this particular these set of observers saw the star going away for a longer time. Here is one observer who saw it before this, I mean the shot, and so on and so forth. So using this particular data, you could actually plot the profile of that asteroid. So you know that if you take a picture, if you can take a good picture, then you can, if you take the photograph of this asteroid would probably look something like this. And this is one simple method by which you can actually get the profile of an asteroid. Now, another interesting aspect of this is that you see this this observer number 2. This observer number 2 did not see the event taking place. Possibly this observer number 3, he or she thought that event took place, but it did not fit the data. But what it is telling you is very important aspect of it. That suppose you had only this observation and this observation, then you certainly know that this asteroid cannot be larger than this particular length. Okay, this is a projection of that light on the surface of Earth. So you know if it is 8 kilometers in diameter, then 8 kilometer shadow wave width also would be 8 kilometers and something like that. Okay, there will be small narrowness, but you can calculate that. So even no observation is a very good data, and there are a large number of such events are predicted. You can participate in that. Then I come to the third point is that amateur telescope making. At planetarium, we teach people how to make telescope, a small 4-inch kind of a telescope, good enough for many activities which I have just described to you. If you are interested, you can come to the planetarium and do the activity. Or if you at some holiday season where you have approximately 10 days of time, then you can do it in your college. We can help you to do, and we can have a telescope making workshop at your college. Certainly it should be possible. We have done at the Nehru Planetarium. Then I suppose this is my last slide here, which is a meteor shower. Again, many a times we see that meteor showers are, people just make a big hue and cry about meteor shower, but systematic observation of meteor shower can give you a good lot of data. You see, meteor shower take place because a comet which has come and gone, comet which has orbited the sun and now it is going back, has left large number of debris behind. And when Earth enters into the debris, you see large number of these meteors. Now, scientifically observing a meteor shower, that is, in a particular direction, how many meteors you see and so on, and accurately recording does help astronomers. And also you can make a model yourself that what kind of a material that comet has left behind, whether the comet has left 3 streams or 4 streams or whatever. Okay, if there are questions, I will answer that later. But meteor shower observations can be done very scientifically, and we have done and reported our observations. So you can consider doing this meteor shower observations. And there is a one shower which is coming. There is one in November, which is a Leonid shower, but that Leonid shower has lost its glory now. It comes every 33.3 years or so. But the another shower which will be coming is in the December, that is a Gemini shower. It's an amazingly beautiful shower. We can all consider going outside Mumbai during that period, maybe hire a bus or something, and systematically observe the shower, and you get good lot of data. So we can you can consider doing that. And now, well, I'll stop here. Now it is your turn. You ask me questions and let me see how I can answer and what how we can take this thing forward. So I stop here. Thank you. It's up to you now. Well, I seem to have taken much more time than allotted to me, but anyway.
No, sir, that's all right. It was really informative, and we did need that background.
Yeah.
So the floor is now open to questions if any of you have any. So we'll be directly answering it if you haven't put in the chat box yet.
Okay. There is one interesting part of observation is that you can also observe the what is it called, binary stars. See, there are stars which are very close by, and there are which you can observe, which gives you very quality data. I think Atharva is asking, can we unmute and speak? Of course, you will have to unmute if you want to speak.
Sir,
How can one start
my
career
name
in
is
astrophysics?
Atharva.
Yeah, Atharva.
Actually, I am in 10th standard currently, and I want to pursue astrophysics and be an amateur astronomer as well. So, how can we contribute to the society as well?
See, Atharva, I would say that if you want to do that, I think for the time being, at least you should concentrate on your studies. First, your physics should be very strong, your mathematics should be very strong, and you should try and get as good marks as possible in your examination. Okay, and then you can pursue. And this is the time where you can actually read a little bit of science and astronomy. You can check that thing out. But I would personally suggest that spend more time doing your studies regularly And once you have done your studies properly and regularly, then you should come back to considering that how what activities you should be taking in observational astronomy. For observing occultations from your own home, because you see occultations are well predicted well in advance, so you can actually take the occultation and you can contribute the data. Occultation data are required by astronomers, so you can certainly participate in that. So to enter in the answer here, to give the final word on your question, is that if you want to be a professional astronomer or scientist, I think you should spend little more time on your career and less time on your hobby.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Vinit. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Vinit.
Sir, I am in BTech right now, but I got keen interest in physics and especially astrophysics.
Yeah.
And right now I'm just observing the skies with a small telescope from my hostels and all. But I want to pursue a career in astrophysics later on after my BTech. So what are the opportunities there?
See, Vinit, organization or institutions like IUCAA, TIFR, PRL, Indian Institute of Astrophysics, all these institutions, they announce the intake of PhD students after your engineering or after your masters. Okay, so you can appear for their written test and then go through the interview, and if you are selected, then you can go for you join as a PhD student. That is one way of going into the stream. Second way is that since you are an engineer, you should also keep looking out at these institutions where whether they are taking direct employment. You know, people are astronomers also would need engineers. In what? Sorry, if I seem to have missed it. In what branch you are doing your engineering?
Mechanical engineering.
Mechanical engineering. So mechanical engineers, so making instruments for observations, whether it is a radio telescope or optical telescope, ultra, whatever it is. Okay, so your skills are required there. So you should consider that. But for that, I think you should also remember in your mind that your basics should be clear. If you see the interviews taken, people generally ask you questions at a very basic level. So try and keep, and this is applicable to everyone, try and keep your fundamentals very clear and study the subject, and then I'm sure you will get your whatever direction that you want to go. But you can certainly do that. Thirdly, I can also tell you that this is not the end of the world, because I know one wonderful amateur astronomer. He's working for BARC, and he's a scientist there. But what he had, his hobby was astronomy. So what he did was, until he got married, that is, until he had the responsibility of one more person, he devoted his large amount of time in setting up his own observatory. So in Kota, he has an observatory, and he's pursuing amateur astronomy more like a professional scientist. So this is not the end. So after becoming a good engineer, if you find a good job elsewhere, you can devote your time, earn good lot of money, and then you can utilize some time for doing observational astronomy. So you can consider any of these things. I think Shailaja wanted to, I see that's the name which is coming. Yeah, and Vinit can also apply for JRF, Junior Research Fellows.
So can, after BTech, we can apply for JRF?
I think so. You can check. Different institutes would have different norms. Okay, so you can check and then you can apply. You will have to see their website and what they want really. Okay. Different institutes would have different.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, so like it's just a normal, not exactly related to observational astronomy, but like you have been observing stars since forever, like the night sky since forever. But like now this generation is like there's a lot of coding involved, specifically coding which really is useful. So, like, can you just describe it how it is different in your time? Because I would really love to observe the sky with my telescope out there, but not enjoy doing coding sitting in the room. So, like that, yeah, it is important. But yeah, that is the perspective. Still, it is in my mind. Ki, like, I'm forced to learn coding. I know it helps me a lot, but I just don't want to do it. But it's important to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Chintan. I understand what you're saying is. See, the coding is that what has happened now is that because after the computers have come in, a lot of people are developing different tools to make sense out of their observations. Okay, and there is absolutely correct, as you said, that I would love to go out in the night, look through the telescope. But there is one more branch which has opened up in last 15 years or 20 years or so, and that is virtual telescopes. Okay, and virtual telescopes are what actually that we astronomers, professional astronomers, keep taking observations and observational data, right? So not every single data, every observation is completely utilized. So suppose someone has taken some part of the sky. Okay, say for example, now we were doing it searching for asteroids. Okay, so we took the images of one part of the sky and looking for asteroid, and our intention was only to see the asteroid. But that particular frame, that particular picture might contain large number of other data. So once I keep this data in a computer, then anyone can retrieve that data and check out whether you have anything of interest available to you. There might be a supernova, there might be a variable star, and so on. So this, what are the virtual observatories, what is called the VO, virtual observatories, are becoming quite famous or quite useful, and you can actually look into virtual virtual observatories. But writing computer programs and all that is a very personalized base. You do the coding for actually pointing your telescope accurately, and write a code to extract data from such virtual observatories and so on. So it's again a limitless kind of activity.
Yes, sir. So when you mentioned like that virtual telescope thing, so I don't know if this exactly fits the criteria, but in like during our first year in the MSc, there was something called as stellarium. So we can observe the transits which were like you can just set the dates and the specific events which you want to observe, and you can kind of observe. So yeah.
Right. You say Stellarium is a software which tells you what is happening in the sky. But virtual observatories is actual data which has been taken, and if you can extract the data, you can publish a scientific paper also. So Stellarium is like a app, okay? It is not doing anything more than that. But virtual observatories, you can extract the data. You can. This is a real science that is taking place there. So keep that in mind. That Stellarium, fine. But if you want to do some scientific observation or scientific work, then you have to go into the virtual observatories. And there are a large number of virtual observatories across the world, and you could try. Virtual observatories are not limited themselves just to optical astronomy, but there is in other branch of electromagnetic spectrum, that data is also kept. In fact, many people also simultaneously look what is there in optical, whether that object is seen in X-ray and so on. So keep that in mind.
Yes, sir.
So we had a question from Yash. Yash, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Oh yeah. Okay. So, firstly, hello, sir.
Hi.
Yeah. So while you were talking, you had mentioned about different stories and different stories of people, or either discoveries. And through the history, we have seen that there is a slight connection between how the science works and how the society works.
Right.
Everything is affected by each other. So what is your take on it, and how can it be further studied more?
I really don't have a kind of answer that you might be, I don't know. For me, it has been only passion and hobby. I mean, I've been telling people that in my entire lifetime, I have never worked anywhere. For my hobby, 3 organizations paid to me. The Indian Institute of Astrophysics, IUCAA, and Nehru Planetarium, they are actually paying for my hobby. Okay, so that is where I stand. And society, yes, of course. See, there is also, I mean, say, okay, since you asked this question, there's a second thing also I must say something, that it is not so easy to get a good career in astronomy and astrophysics, or anyway, basic sciences. There's not, that kind of a money. So as he said that engineering, okay, you do mechanical engineering and you might start earning much better money than your friend who has taken a career in science, pure sciences. Okay, I'm not talking about the medical science where there is a good lot of money available. So when you actually talk about real life or society, then for your own sustenance, that you need money. Having said that, I must also tell you that if you are a good physicist, good astronomer, good scientist, then government looks after you pretty well, in the sense that you don't have to beg and borrow money from your relatives if you want to send your children to school or colleges or medical things. So these have been taken good care of. Salaries are pretty good, but certainly not at par with the what industry can give you. So this is the choice which you will have to make, that how much, whether you want to go into the industry and make a good lot of money elsewhere. Because reason I'm telling you is this, that I have in my past 15, 20, 30 years of career, I have seen large number of amateur astronomers were very, very devoted, very interested in astronomy and astrophysics, but they did not pursue astronomy as a career, and actually they have gone to industry or someplace. In fact, there is one astronomer who was a brilliant chap, absolutely brilliant chap. He and his classmate, they were too good, and they had come to they used to come to IUCAA to make a simple photometer as their college project. Now one of them has become a faculty at GMRT, that is Giant Meter Wave Radio Telescope, Tata TIFR's NCRA, that is National Center for Radio Astrophysics. And other one who was very devoted and excellent scientist, has gone to Switzerland, and actually he has joined a bank because he had such a tremendous skills with computer that he actually took up a job in the bank, and he's probably making money equal to salary of 3 or 4 faculty members. So you can take your own call what you want. But having said this, one last thing I'll also put, that the kind of satisfaction you get by doing your own research has no parallel really. But this is your choice, your family's choice, what you want to do ultimately.
Sir, Neil also had a question. Neil, would you like to unmute and ask a question?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so sir, our college has an excellent MSc program which lets students pursue a 6-month thesis in which there is no coursework and you can just focus on your research. Unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of students who have participated in instrumentation. There has been a lot of students who went to theory and data analysis, which is excellent. But because the instrumentation is slightly clunky and they did not get the opportunity to do that, how feasible is it that for, like, say, a 4-month project, multiple students, maybe 4 students taking up 4 different aspects of a telescope, perhaps one building a telescope, perhaps one building a photometer, perhaps one working on a spectrometer, and one on a tracking mount? How possible is it to kind of assemble a functioning telescope within, say, 6 months if, say, 4 or 5 people are working on it as their MSc projects?
Okay. I'll give you one example for this. There is a Cummins College for Women in Pune. Okay. So when I was in Pune, the 3 students from that college, these girls came and they wanted to do some project in related to astronomy, but it was a mechanical engineering project, mechanical and electronic related project. So what the project they completed was that they made a stand. You see, one project was to actually find out the sky brightness as the night progresses. Now, how it is done is as follows: that if you look at the straight in the sky, okay, the sky, you see the brightness in different direction. As you go closer to the horizon, the sky brightness start increasing. And so brighter the sky, you see less number of stars. Okay, that's the relation. So what the project they did was that they made this photometer, then put it on a servo motor controller, and it was a stand like this. Okay, it was a stand, and then the telescope was pointing. And then what the project they did was that you would start at some point, you measure the sky brightness here, then turn it by 90 degrees, so north, south, east, west at 45-degree angle, then one right overhead. And all this data would get stored into a chip, which you can read it later on. Okay, so this is how the project was done. So similarly, in your case also, as ma'am has said, we can at some point in time, if you are interested in some instrumentation kind of project, we can certainly put our heads together and see what project we can evolve. And we will be very happy to help you about 3 to 3.5 months time. If you start thinking about it right now, so when you actually, the time comes when you are going to do the project, you will be ready to do the project. So we can do that. There could be many simple projects or many instrumentation projects which you can participate in. And it is possible for us to help you out in various ways. There could be a number of things which you can design, you see, automatically tracking sky, or image analysis, or suppose you're a computer engineering person, then you can download certain data automatically and then analyze the data. There is no limit to it. Does this answer your question, Neil?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So Shailja had a question. Shailja, could you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
Good evening, sir. My question is from your slide itself.
Yeah.
Sir, where can we observe that Geminite meteor shower? Like, which place of India is it more visible?
Shailaja, this is the thing, that any place in India, see, it is in the constellation of Gemini. Okay, Gemini is the northmost constellation on the ecliptic. Okay, so Gemini, we are very well placed for observing Geminite meteor shower. The Gemini constellation actually comes up about 10 o'clock, around that period, 9:30, 10 o'clock or so, around close to 19th of December. That is the peak time. So if you guys are interested, we can actually chalk out a plan. And because this constellation is setting towards the western horizon, I suppose staying over at St. Xavier College in the night, if they permit, even that might not be a bad idea. Else, together you can go to some place about 100 kilometers north of Mumbai, or maybe even in the southern part, some area like that you can go, and you can observe the shower from there. So no problem about it. But if you want to do something scientifically, then what I suggest you may do is that form a small group, and then in next week or sometime we can sit across the table and chalk out what we should do, how we should learn to do observation scientifically, and then they take the bull by its horns on the night of Geminite shower. It's a beautiful shower, and it's a very faithful one. That is, it comes regularly. In fact, I have seen that early in the morning you get so tired that you will never stop writing and taking down the data, and you just simply look at the sky and enjoy this meteor flashing around you. So if you form a group or you want to do something, we will be very happy to help you out. Is that
Sir,
fine?
I'm not from St. Xavier's.
Oh, okay. Which college you are from?
Allahabad University.
Oh, you are from Allahabad, you are talking about.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So even in Allahabad, it is fine, Shailaja. You can participate in this shower. Let me see, Apurva and the St. Xavier College, if you want to take a small lead in this particular field, we can form a group and we can talk about how to observe Geminite shower. I have not done something which, let me see if I can do that actually. Let me do this, which I should have. Okay. I'm writing my email ID. Oops. Okay, this is my email ID. That P has to be small, of course. You can write to me, and if you think, then I can take a lead and form a small group where we can discuss observations of meteor shower, and we can see how we can go ahead. Can you see my slide, my email ID?
Oh, no, sir.
Oh, no. Okay, let me see why it can't.
So you've stopped sharing the
Oh,
screen.
okay. So where I am? Okay, here. Okay, I'll do here. I'll type here, so you can copy it down. This keyboard has changed a bit. This is my email ID. So send me a mail if you are interested in observations of meteor shower. We can form a side group and discuss how to go about it. I can send you also various links to observe. One link, let me see. I'll just give you that link also. Okay. It is called Wish Upon a Shooting Star. Okay. Log in into this page. Where are we? Yeah.
Henrietta Swan, that graph you have
Yeah.
shown.
Yeah.
So what are the units are that in the graph? Like, can you explain that once?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have. Oh, Emma is also here. Great. Okay, I'm so sorry. See, on the x-axis is the time which is progressing, and on the y-axis is the brightness of the star. Okay, intensity of the star. So star's intensity in the case of a Cepheid variable, it increases sharply, then slowly it drops. Then again increases sharply, slowly it drops. But in case of Algol type variable, the light goes like this, it goes down quickly, comes up again, then remains steady, then drops, and so on. So that is the light curve. We call it light curve. Okay, and this is another on the same site. Okay, you can actually say this. Let me also share with you in that case. There is another link which you can check out. Here we talk about Algol, John Goodrick, and so on. So you can go through this, and it tells you this particular site. I have written down how you can actually observe the star with the naked eye. And having said this, let me see if I have the thing computed for November. I have given you the minima time of it's here. October I had given, but I'm not sure. Yes, it is there. Here we go. See, these are the minima timings. Okay. So what you can see is that first this on 6th is gone. Today is 9th. Actually, it was yesterday. Then on 21st, the star would be going to minima at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so you start observing close to midnight, and by our morning, it will be at its faintest. I think 24th of November is a very good time for all of us to actually observe it, because somewhere around 9:30, the star will start fading up. It will start to fade. Then it will become bright again. And believe me, it is something which you will never forget when you do it once. It's amazing. The star which you have been seeing actually becoming faint and then becoming bright. I remember once I had, after the total solar eclipse of 1980, we were traveling and we saw that all the while I was traveling from Ahmedabad to Mumbai. And as we progress in the night, we saw this happening. It's an amazing feeling to actually see the star changing its brightness. So you can do that. You can do it with a mobile camera. You can take the pictures one after the other and see the star brightness recording. Gives you some insight as to how to do our instrumentation or observational astronomy. And someone had asked me this question, right? That we want to do instrumentation. So well, we can also think of a project where you can couple instrumentation with your observations. So that should also be possible.
Yes, sir. So like that is Neil's idea to do it, and Neil's batch has already been like their MSc is finished, but we have this opportunity, like thesis is still going on. So we would really love if we could get into something, because our entire MSc was like sitting in front of a computer and having lectures, and we never even got to see our college. So if we could do something like that now, it would be really fun. Like at least it will give me some aspects of astronomy, like handling a telescope or something like that. So yeah.
Oh, if you're talking about simple handling of telescope, then just send me a mail. We also have a what is called a free PDF bulletin called Sky News. In that we list various astronomical events taking place. See, another event which could be of importance and which you could think about it is that the velocity of light. You see, the velocity of light was first calculated by Auber by observing the occultations of Jupiter's moon by Jupiter. See what is or eclipses of Jupiter's moon. What is happening is that Jupiter moon is Jupiter is so far away, about how much it is, 5 times. That was not 5 times the distance between Earth and Sun. I think 5 astronomical units or something like that. Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure. So light coming from that takes certain amount of time. Okay. So what the idea was very interestingly simple. The thing was that you calculate the orbital period of Io, or innermost satellite of Jupiter. Okay, and then you say that eclipses would take at this particular interval or periodicity, and then what you find is that what you have computed, the orbital period, the time of eclipses are taking slightly longer or slightly shorter. That is, if you are going toward Jupiter, then you see the light slightly coming to you earlier. So you see the orbital period becoming shorter, or if you are going away from Jupiter, then orbital period becoming longer. And using this data, he was able to calculate the velocity of light. So you can also consider, and right now Jupiter is just above, if you see soon after the sunset, I think tonight Jupiter will be very close to Jupiter and Saturn. I think moon will be between Jupiter and Saturn. I'm not too sure at this particular point in time. Let me see if I can switch on the other computer. Let me just tell you exactly where it would be. Okay. See, tonight, if you see moon, okay, moon will be half illuminated, and this is sun. You look at moon, okay, slightly above moon, what the object that you will see is Saturn, and to its left will be Jupiter, the brighter planet. Okay, and even through a 1-inch telescope, you can actually see the satellites of Jupiter. And the same site that which I had shown you, there is maybe a link somewhere else. I can tell you how to get the speed of light by observing the eclipses of moons of Jupiter. So that's a beautiful experiment which is possible. Another experiment which I can tell you is that when you look at the sun, okay, sun, normally it appears to us that it is uniformly illuminated, but if you see the pictures of sun, it is rather bright in the center, and intensity drops towards the edges. It is called the solar limb darkening. Now, using your mobile cameras, the photometer, you can actually read out, actually do the observations of solar limb darkening. This is possible to do just with a homemade instrumentation. So anything. If you want, you can come down here at the planetarium, or at some point in time I can come to your college and we can, with the specific projects in mind, we can discuss across the table, sitting together, what projects we can do. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I did not press return. So here is the data actually. You can take down, this is the Algol data. This is the time. You can see that particularly if you take this 26th of November, where you see that minima would be, you can see just as the sun sets, the star is becoming faint, and at 10:22 or something, it will be faintest and it will start rising. Believe me that this is some experience. If you do it with the naked eye, you are not going to forget it so soon. Okay.
Yes.
So are we done?
Yes, sir. Just one last thing. I wanted to call Divyanshi for the vote of thanks.
Yeah, Divyanshi.
Good evening, everyone. I am Divyanshi, and I'm here to present the vote of thanks for today's session. I would like to thank our guest speaker, Mr. Arvind Paranjpe, for visiting and enlightening us with his knowledge. Today's lecture was full of knowledge and interesting themes. It gave deep insights into the topic and also revealed some interesting facts. I am pretty sure the precious knowledge that Mr. Arvind Paranjpe gave us will definitely help us in our studies and future. Once again, I would like to thank Mr. Arvind Paranjpe for taking out time from their busy schedule and enlightening us with the knowledge. I would also like to thank Jyoti ma'am, the head of the Department of Physics, St. Xavier's College, Emma, the ex-chairperson of Sigma Phi, and of course, the Society of Physics for organizing such an extraordinary and informative session, and also the audience for making it a great success. Thank you so much.
Can I add one more thing, little bit?
Yes, sir, sure, please.
All your physics students, I mean, we talked about astronomy today, but universe of physics is much bigger than astronomy, I suppose. I think it's a very bad statement, but because anyway, see, we have at the planetarium, we also have a laboratory for school students. And if any one of you would like to think of a project which can help a student to understand physics, you're welcome. We can help you to build a project. We can help you to build an instrument and participate in that. So you can come and see what we are doing it here. Okay. And if you, in your spare time, if you would like to teach students, school students, they are 8, 9, 10 standard students. So you are welcome to do. You are welcome at the planetarium. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I forgot, I mean, I wanted to say it right at the beginning, but physics, we have many experiments in physics. See, one of the experiments which as a physics student, and when you have this this college fair, okay, which you can do is that, and we have been doing it, it's a good thing that, you know, conservation of angular momentum, right? That if the distance become less, you start spinning. So one simple thing which you can do, if you haven't done it already, I'm sorry, I'm repeating it, but take a small ballpoint pen like this. This is again, I thought just now. Okay, take out the nib and refill out of it. Put a thread through it and attach on one side a heavy bob, you know, our pendulum brass bob or something. And on the below, attach slightly heavier bob so that when you just hold it, the bob takes it down. Okay, the heavier bob takes it down. Then you start rotating it. So as you start rotating it, centrifugal force, this heavier bob will start going up, even though the other bob is of lesser mass, right? So you rotate it. The third thing that you can do is that as you start rotating it, you pull this thing down, the bottom bob. And what will happen is that you will see that it is spinning faster. So you can release and push it, show that how the angular momentum is conserved when the distance is increased or decreased. It's a beautiful experiment. Similarly, there is another experiment which is called the old man's toy, in which it was presented to Einstein by a physicist, famous physicist. What that toy was, that it was a plastic glass or metallic glass or whatever, okay? And what it was done is that an elastic spring was put through it and it was attached to it. So if the bob is here and it is kept in the spring, so you have to pull this elastic band, that bob goes and sits here. You get the point? Okay, it's a bob which is attached. Now, if you allow this glass to fall or a plastic one to fall, giving a free fall, then what will happen? The weight of that bob will become zero and it plops, it goes inside the cup. And it's another amazing experiment to look at. That is something which is heavy is now pulled inside the cup. So there are many experiments like that. So you're welcome. You can try out things here. We have some experienced people to handle the instrumentation part, cutting and building things. And with your innovative ideas, we can build some more nice teaching instruments. Okay, so that is what I wanted to tell you about the physics student. Anyway, thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to all of you, and hope we will meet in future and discuss.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming.
It was a pleasure meeting you all.
Thank you, sir.